Hi students, good evening. I hope you are all doing well. Okay, and today's class, after we have finished sonnets, I am going to give you the introduction to the metaphysical school of poetry. Okay, which is actually a distinct school of poetry that uh, that was prevalent during the 17th century. After the sonnets, which we have seen, which flow, in a very natural manner and also with heart touching. Okay, etc. We have a set of poems which are unlike the sonnets, especially the sonnets of Shakespeare. So before we go to see any one or two of the poems that are prescribed for your study, I just want to give you a brief introduction to this metaphysical school of poetry. What are its themes and who are the major poets, and also some of the characteristics, and also a few lines of you know a few introductory lines of each representative poet of this metaphysical school of poetry. Okay, let me share my screen now. Yeah, I hope my screen is visible to you. um, So let us see what is the metaphysical poetry. Okay, the contents which I'll be going to deal with in this class are like definition, themes, major poets, and contributions. Okay, of course, criticism also. So first of all, I just want to give you the definition part. So the term metaphysical means beyond the physical. So if you go to the etymology of this word, this is a combination of two, that is meta and physical. Meta is beyond the physical. So this combination of metaphysical with these two words, the etymology reveals that it is going to deal with some themes or some concepts which are not in this physical world, which we may not be able to see with the naked eye or perceive that easily. So it is beyond the physical world, beyond this world. So of course you may think what is there beyond this world. Naturally, we never give thought to these kinds of feelings, what is there beyond, etc. We only believe in God and we think that after that we'll be reaching to God. Okay, but there is much that is invisible besides the world that is visible to us. Even we think that we know very much about this universe, but what we know is only a speck. Okay, so this is a school of poetry which actually is trying to deal with so many um, themes that are beyond our physical world. That is why they were given the name of metaphysical, or metaphysical school of poets or poetry. Actually, in 17th century, we can witness the development of science and technology. New discoveries and inventions were being made. So it's believed that these poets, who are very learned also, have this vast knowledge of science and technology, and they have brought their knowledge into their literature sphere also, that is their creative activity of poetry. Okay, so the the metaphysical school of poetry is referred to some major poets who wrote poetry during 17th century, and they were considered to be exploring a fusion of intellect and emotion. That is what, literature combined with science and technological aspects, new inventions, discoveries, etc. So here we will find in this poetry, unlike the poetry of, say, Spenser or Chaucer or Shakespeare we have seen till now. It is a different kind of poetry that we are going to encounter in this unit. And this is a combination of intellect and emotion. So actually this kind of poetry was brought into light by the giant figure in English literature, Samuel Johnson. Okay, Samuel Johnson is, as you might have known by this time, is the lexicographer and also a critic and a poet, essayist also. He actually coined this term metaphysical, not in praise of these poets, but in a very what you say, a critical manner. He actually, to say, Samuel Johnson is a very ardent, what you call, he's a very strong or he strongly adores Shakespeare. See, and he thinks that Shakespeare is the greatest personality, and of course, no doubt, Shakespeare is the greatest personality. And in his book, Preface to Shakespeare, he tries to evaluate. Johnson tries to evaluate that Shakespeare is, writes with ease. Okay, and his writing has a facility, and then he thinks that it's like life. Shakespeare's literature writings means nothing but life. There may not be any artificiality in that. It is, of course, though they don't seem to be very intellectual when we read. As we have finished reading sonnets, they are all very simple, yet they are having profound thought. So Samuel Johnson has all the praise for Shakespeare, and even though he is having some demerits, Shakespeare is having some demerits, he tries to justify why he was going into those demerits. So Samuel Johnson was a very giant personality in his time. And then he, besides the writings of Elizabethan period, that is, he is actually edited one. No, all Shakespeare's works, all works. Okay, the collection of Shakespeare's works. So here, after that, he actually has come to write about the lives of the most eminent English poets as from 1179 to 1781. Okay, there he actually tries to ridicule metaphysical poetry. So he only used this term for the first time to define a loose group of poets of 17th century. But as now we actually designate, say, romantic poets, neoclassic poets, Elizabethan poets, etc., etc. But the truth is, they never know that they come under one particular head or one particular tag or group. It is only the makeover of the literary historians, critics, etc. So the group who are included in this metaphysical poetry, while they were living, they never know each other. They read each other's writings also. Yet this the metaphysical school of poetry, of course, became very popular in the 20th century, and due to the work of T.S. Eliot. This I am not adding here, but it is only to mention. After Samuel Johnson, Dryden also used this, and then later, 20th century, because of T.S. Eliot, who's again a giant personality in the English literature, was the one who gave life to this metaphysical school of poetry, who wrote, uh, many. T.S. Eliot is not only a poet but also a critic also. So he is the one who critically tried to project the greatness of metaphysical poetry, how they have wonderful characteristics while combining intellect, emotion, etc. So this is the a brief definition of the metaphysical school of poetry. And if you see the some definitions, like if you go to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, metaphysical poetry is defined like this: it is highly intellectualized poetry. So, as I told you, it is a combination of intellect and emotion. So, as it is told, of course, Webster's dictionary defines this in this way: it is highly intellectualized poetry marked by bold and ingenious conceits. Okay, bold, very what do you say, to say some things we need much courage, courageous and clever conceits. What is a conceit? We will, it is like an extended metaphor. We will come to discuss that while we discuss John Donne's poem that is prescribed for your study, Canonization. Okay. And also incongruous imagery. So incongruous means sometimes we may feel that the imagery is not in harmony. Okay, the images that are being used, etc. This quality also we will examine with reference to John Donne's poem. And then complexity and subtlety of thought. It's very difficult. They are not as simple as sonnets of Shakespeare. Okay, too superficial. Sonnets of Shakespeare. Of course, the language is very lucid, very simple, and the ideas, images are very familiar, and we can connect them. But here in these poems, there is a complexity. Okay, even imagery used is also not in harmony with our regular, regular traditional or conventional imagery like that. So there is much complexity and also subtle thought, and also frequent use of paradox. So now paradox is putting two different things together. So this is the paradox, and then paradox is very much present in metaphysical poetry, and often by deliberate harshness or rigidity of expression. So we can see that there is often harsh in expression, and also there is a kind of rigidity. So when we go to the poem, the poems prescribed, we will of course understand what exactly is, what you say, uh, the meaning of this deliberate harshness, rigidity, and ingenious conceits and imagery, and all these things we will understand when we read the poem. Okay, that is the definition given by Webster's, and I have given for your understanding a very general definition of metaphysical poetry. Uh, of course, that prevails in the literary circles. So, this is a genre of poetry that deals with deep and profound subjects like spirituality, religion, etc. Of course, it is intellectual. At the same time, it also deals with the questions of spirituality, religion, and etc. And it is a highly intellectual form of poetry and presents the world to its readers in a different way. So, what is the world that is surrounding us? We know the world to some extent, and in Shakespeare's sonnets, you will come to know the world that is very familiar to us. But when you come to the poems of metaphysical poets, you will be finding a different world in the poems of these metaphysical poets. And also it asks questions that science cannot answer. See, though this intellectuality is influenced with their reference, with their knowledge to so many science and technological developments that were taking place during their time, which they'll be bringing into their poetic language also. They, of course, deal with so many questions which cannot be answered by science, and it prompts the readers to question their reality and existence. So when you read, we'll be thinking of many things that they are explaining, and at times we'll be very surprised to think in the lines in which the metaphysical poet is taking our thinking or thought, etc. So it takes one beyond the physical world, as the word itself is revealing, metaphysical. So it takes us away from the physical world, and it gives us new perspectives through its imagery. So, and of course, wit and paradox. All paradox, I told you, wit is a clever humor, we should say, not a humor simply, but it's a humor, but mixed with much, what do you say, cleverness also. Okay, and next, actually, if you um, read metaphysical poetry, we will relapse into a kind of um, a state of mind where we will be uh, asking these questions. These questions, as you can read on the slide: is our world real or a projection? So highly, sometimes they are highly spiritual, philosophical, and sometimes you can't even imagine that this is how the world, the life of human beings is. So you actually, after going through those poems, will be thinking whether the world is real or is it only a projection, and is there an afterlife? So afterlife, actually, when Shakespeare, of course, is talking about the afterlife of his beloved, we take it for granted, because he's saying that thus his beloved is going to live in the rhymes and the poetry, where of course we have been reading, as I told you, after 5 centuries of writing, Shakespeare has written, we are had written, we are still reading. So there, of course, it is not like the beloved is continuing his life, but it is accepting that, of course, death is very common, and resurrection is, what do you say, the second coming is also commonly believed. And also, we don't, when we read about the immortality or immortality in Shakespeare's sonnets, we don't get any idea or any question, we don't contemplate regarding the afterlife. Okay, but here, when you read a metaphysical poem, actually we'll be entering into such questions. And then, and can souls travel in time? So they'll be describing so many things that are above this world or beyond this world, as if they have visited, and they're and as if they know, they are very familiar with souls that are traveling in time. So actually, we try to, we will be awestricken to know that, will this happen like that, and then is God out there? So it will be, though they are very spiritual, they are very religious, yet sometimes we'll be questioning ourselves: is God out there in heaven? And are we restricted in our bodies or free? So with this body, what are you going to do? So that means, will we be restricted in these bodies only, or will we be free? Like, while you are alive only, can you think of this world beyond the visible world? So all kinds of thinkings about the invisible world, etc. Is fate real? Of course, this is the word which we often use: fate, fate, fate. Okay, so what is it? Is it real? So when you read some metaphysical poems, actually will be transposed into a different world of contemplation, where you will be asking all these questions. Okay, there are just so many questions like that, which, if we don't read metaphysical poetry, uh, of course, ignore till this time, while listening to my lecture also, you might have never contemplated on such questions. So I'm sure whether if some of you are contemplating, it's a different thing. But though we believe in religion, we take it for granted that God is there in heaven and everything is okay with our world, and we believe in God and we think that we don't question, is it real, etc., all those things. So many questions we may not be entertaining if at all we don't read any metaphysical poems. So um, I think these are some of the questions which the metaphysical poetry will transport our minds and make us contemplate about these questions. Okay, so with all these explanations, of course, by this time you might have guessed what are the themes. What are the themes? Theme is nothing but a subject of that particular poem that we will be reading. So, in metaphysical poems, like any other poems of Shakespeare, etc., or Spenser, you have all these things: love, religion, mortality, nature. So these are the um, themes. Of course, they are all familiar only. The greatness of metaphysicals, what is the uniqueness of metaphysicals, then you will be wondering, because these themes are all general themes only, which we of course have seen in other poets also. The uniqueness lies in the variety of presentation, how these themes will be presented to us. So they will not be presented in a very regular, common manner. So that is where lies the difference between the metaphysical poets and the other poets, say the Renaissance or Elizabethans, etc. So let us come to some of the characteristics of metaphysical poetry. This is some words I have put in a different color. So I'm reading those words only. It is complexity. As we have already discussed, the poems are very much complex, talking of all complex themes. Okay, and then we find that there is undisassociated sensibility. That means the feeling and thoughts. Actually, feeling is to the heart and thought is to the mind. Okay, so you will find unusual combination of undissociated sensibility here. And then these poems are witty. So I think I need not explain it further, because you can read in the slides. And the next characteristic of metaphysical poetry is ambiguity. They won't present us at one reading. We can't understand anything, and much ambiguity is there. Okay, and because of the complex themes and the metaphysical ideas that are being dealt by them in these poems, we'll find these poems very ambiguous, and the ambiguity prevails. It's very difficult to understand. And then it is, of course, but very brief. They will not be very lengthy poems, like you have Edmund Spenser's Epithalamion or Prothalamion, Epithalamion with 24 stanzas, and Prothalamion also, some, I don't remember the number of stanzas. So they are not like lengthy poems, but they are very brief. Okay, and use words also very briefly, but those words will convey a lot of ideas, and also a lot of meaning will be there. Okay, so you will find brevity, but they are not simple in their thought, and they are not simple in their meaning also. Though brief, they are very tough, they are very complex. And then you have an unusual comparison of things. So usually we know how simile, or what is that, figures of speech are used in poems. So all poetry, of course, includes figures of speech, simile, metaphor, etc., where comparisons are there. But when you read these comparisons in other poems, and the poems which belong to other ages or other schools, actually, you will find that this comparison is very usual. But with the metaphysicals, that is not like that. They have unusual comparisons which will be leading to a metaphysical conceit. As I told you, a conceit is an extended metaphor. Okay, so their unusual way of comparisons used in their poetry leads to this what is called as metaphysical conceit. And one more characteristics, as I told you, the poetry is a combination of intellectuality. So these poems are brain sprung, not heartfelt. So they are intellectual. And one critic, Grierson, he says that the two chief characteristics of this metaphysical poetry are paradoxical ratiocination and passionate feelings. And paradox is there, as well as the passionate feeling is also there. Okay. And I've given you an example there. You need not bother about that. So these are the characteristics and also themes of metaphysical poetry. So now these are the major poets during in the metaphysical school of poetry. These are not final. The list may be added. Some more minor poets may also be there, but I am here giving you the major representative poets like John Donne, Henry Vaughan, Andrew Marvell, John Cleveland, Abraham Kavli, George Herbert, and Richard Crashaw. So these are the major poets. And in the following slides, I have all a brief introduction to each the poets, each of the poets that are mentioned here. But let me conclude. You can just read, even Google for the what you say about the work, or how the poets have contributed to the metaphysical school of poetry, etc. So not much importance I can give to those slides. You can read later. So the criticism, as I told you earlier itself, during the course of the 1920s, of course, Eliot did much, as I told you, to establish the importance of the metaphysical school. So, because Eliot, of course, thinks that Shakespeare has been receiving undue attention from centuries, whereas Shakespeare is not a flawless writer. You can find many technical flaws also. So he wrote an essay like Hamlet and His Problems, and then he has much criticism against Shakespeare, and then he is in favor of metaphysical poets, and he is the one who actually brought metaphysicals into life in the 20th century. Yes, so with these lines, with this brief introduction, I can close the class here, and we will continue in the next class to discuss the prescribed poems, that is John Donne's Canonization and Andrew Marvell's To His Coy Mistress. I hope you have the text of those two poems. If you don't have, you please try to Google in the Poetry Foundation, .com, where you will get the authorized text. You can write down in one notebook and just go through that when I teach, or when I explain. I feel that though I have been sharing you the link, a few members are joining, and even those members are not at all interacting in the class. So, and due to the technical problems, I could not share a link today. But I'll be sharing from the tomorrow. So try to be interactive in the classrooms. Okay, have a nice time.